So Georgia scrimmages, they get some rain, so they did sort of that half and half. They do some wet ball work in the stadium, then they go indoors. And so I'm not really sure, who took reps where and when and how dry it was. The best that I could tell, and again, the guys over at dogs247.com did a really good job of aggregating a ton of information. Kind of hard to come by sometimes. Trust me, I know, it's really hard to come by. But the best I could tell, JT Daniels had a good day, and I'm going to talk a lot about JT Daniels here. But I'll tell you, one of the things that's starting to pop in my mind more and more is there's sometimes just a confluence of career paths. Sometimes if you're a player and then you're on campus and then an offensive coordinator comes in at the right time, it is just what the doctor ordered for your development. And I wonder, out loud, because I don't know the answer here, what the hiring of Todd Monken as offensive coordinator there is going to do long-term for Carson Beck. I don't expect Carson Beck to start at quarterback for Georgia this year, nor does he. However, whereas at one point in time, everything I was told from Athens led me to believe he'd never see the field in meaningful action. Nowadays, it's, who looks good? Who looks better and better is Carson Beck. Now, it's always followed up with, I ain't saying he's going to start this year. I'm just saying I don't expect him to transfer out in disgrace like maybe I did a year ago. Just keep an eye on that. It's not something that necessarily, unless there's injury to JT Daniels, there's not something there that's probably going to crop its head up this year, but just keep an eye on that and keep that in mind. Two popular takeaways from the Georgia scrimmage yesterday. Defensive line's really good. Don't think that's a big shock. And JT Daniels is really good. Don't think that's a big shock. Now, here's what we're about to find out. This time last year, it was obviously a worst-case scenario for many different reasons. But when it comes to football, you had a new offensive coordinator coming in. There was all this hope and confidence in the world that Georgia offense was about to undergo a little bit of a makeover. And then someone turned the lights out. Spring practice is canceled. So your new coordinator, hop on Zoom, install your offense that way. And so Kirby Smart, as he would be prone to do, knowing the kind of defense he had, went into his more conservative turtle shell, at least from a football standpoint, and said, we're going to play the way that we know how to play. I'm going to put Stetson Bennett out there, as it turns out, because of a lack of other options, and we're going to play Georgia football, as we've already defined it. Well, now we're in spring of 2021. And as you can clearly see, they have the opportunity to get on the field. JT Daniels returned. He didn't go to the draft. And so now we get to find out about Todd Monken. And then we go through spring, and we keep getting this feedback on these scrimmages from Athens, where offense is ahead of the defense. You never hear that at Georgia. Never. From the time Kirby Smart walked in there to present day, this is the first time I can remember consistently from practice at Georgia hearing, well, offense got the better of the defense again. It's normally the opposite. It's normally defense smothered the offense. Don't worry, that's probably one of the, if not the best defenses they'll face all year. So we'll get it in gear, and then come fall, we'll be able to put up 35 if we need to. Well, it's a different tune right now. Now, I don't know because I haven't been able to see it firsthand. And I don't know what kind of situations we're talking about. And I don't know if it's just a spring thing and then come fall by week 4, everything looks the same. I would bet my next to bottom dollar that's not the case, but we'll see. But the point is, this is where we get to find out about Todd Monken, because if things are as they appear there, and if JT Daniels is as good as it sounds like he has been, then there is no excuse not to see a quantum leap in offensive production. So that's what I look forward to, because I don't think there's any reason not to expect that. You could point out the injury to George Pickens at wide receiver, and I would, on the surface, say, yeah, that is a really good reason to pump my brakes. But the head coach there is not doing that. More on that in just a second. What bothers them right now, what bothers them the most behind the scenes, is they got injuries at running back, and that's normally not a huge deal at Georgia. You got running back injury in the spring, it'll be there. As sure as the leaves are going to change color in the fall, Georgia will have 1 or 2 guys capable of rushing for 1,000+ yards. They always do, always have, always will. That's not what I'm talking about. The bigger concern just beneath the surface, a little bit less obvious, is if you think about what they're trying to do offensively. And that is overhaul their passing game, modernize their passing game, lean on the quarterback position a little bit more, emphasize the passing game a little bit more, work off of it like their compadres in Gainesville or Tuscaloosa have done this last year especially. What becomes really critical, if you haven't done that for several years, what becomes really critical in spring install period is understanding the running back position from a blitz pickup and pass pro standpoint. Because that's stuff that a lot of these guys haven't been asked to do a whole lot. I mean, they have not trotted a quarterback out there that struck the fear of God into any defense for quite a while, especially last year when these running backs would have been on campus. So no one went into a game against Stetson Bennett, for example, and said, we're going to have to get after him. We cannot let Stetson Bennett sit back there and pick us apart. That wasn't what any defensive coordinator worth their salt was saying last year. But this year, when you got JT Daniels and hopefully for Georgia's sake, some really good options at tight end, which I think they do have, and wide receiver, which they will hopefully have, now you may have the propensity as an opposing defensive coordinator to look at Georgia and say, we got to get after JT Daniels. We got to put him on his back a few times. We got to hit him. We got to get after him. Well, all of a sudden, it becomes very, very imperative, more than it ever was before, for any running back you have on the field to be a plus-level pass pro guy. And if they're injured in spring, it's really hard to learn that stuff and install that stuff mentally without getting the physical reps. That's what's aggravating them right now, really more so than anything. But let me work back to this wide receiver deal for just a second. So yesterday, Smart's talking in his post-practice media availability. Someone asked him about George Pickens. He's out. Who's been stepping up? And I think the first takeaway that I really was happy to hear is Jermaine Burton is able to do individual work, which means long-term he's going to be fine. I mean, there was a fear not too long ago when you checked your phone and you had that update, are we going to lose him for the season too? Like, Burton's the guy you can't afford to lose, I think, most of all now, at least in my mind. He did individual work yesterday, according to Kirby Smart. I think, who was it? It was Arian Smith, who was a true freshman speedster, could probably outrun his own shadow. Had a touchdown catch yesterday, so all that's good to hear. But then Kirby Smart didn't stop there. He went a little bit further, and he started naming off guys. He said, this guy, that guy. Like, they've all made plays. They've all done things in spring. And if you know anything about Smart, and this kind of gets into the weeds a little bit, you have to have a pretty established data bank in your mind of reference points to know a coach, to know his tendencies. Some coaches step to the podium and they just sing the praises of every player on their roster. And you can't really decide anything or deduce anything from that. Other coaches, getting compliments out of them is like pulling teeth. Therefore, when they volunteer that information, you learn that your ears should perk up a little bit. Well, Kirby Smart, unsolicited yesterday, really just started naming off receivers and started saying, I'm kind of fired up about the unit, actually. Obviously, we lose George Pickens. Obviously, that's a loss in skill. It's a loss in quality depth. But he did not sound overly concerned, nearly as concerned as a lot of the faithful out there in red and black, that they're going to be incapable of filling that slot and having really, really good production there. So, again, that's one of those time will tell sort of deals. But I think it was noteworthy, especially coming from Kirby Smart. Moving forward to Saturday, really interested to watch them on the offensive line. Defensive backs obviously been a glaring, not area of weakness, but area of focus for us with Georgia this spring because of the inexperience there. Talent, but inexperience. But, another thing before we move on here that is a perfect encapsulation of what last year cost guys is a guy like Tate Ratledge. He was a high 4-star, 5-star guy coming out of high school, depending on where you looked, but he was raw. So he was coming out, and he was an early enrollee last year. He was going to be a guy who goes through spring, and we'll see, like, massive human being, going to probably work on the interior for us. If we can get him through spring and start to get him some reps, hey, maybe halfway through or the back half of this schedule in 2020, maybe he starts seeing some first-team game reps. Well, it never happened. Like, that effort never got off the ground. Well, now you get a full spring. And so now maybe instead of freshman year, it's sophomore year, but maybe a guy like Tate Ratledge all of a sudden is a guy that benefits mightily from having a spring. Smart talked about him yesterday and said he's just a guy we knew needed 1,000 reps when he came here before he was ever going to get on the field for us in meaningful action. And now he's working his way towards that 1,000 reps. And so just one of many things I'm kind of excited about. Got some really good spring games this coming Saturday. You would think that's it for the spring intel, wouldn't you? I told you we were jam-packed. I told you this is the most jam-packed show we've had all spring. We are 20 minutes in, and we still got a lot to go. So buckle up.